My mother was here earlier today and she remarked about Doctor Who and magic. That is so cool. And I was like, what? Okay, cool. Universes beyond, bringing people together, baby. Let's talk about sticky prices. I talked about sticky wages the other day. Y'all liked that. So now let's keep talking about the sticky stuff, prices. So sticky prices, the idea here is that there are times when prices are set and they're not flexible, because you see price in theory should be, it should represent something and not just the whim that somebody says like, oh, I think this is worth $10. Prices are much deeper than that. They mean something. They have, there's laws in the universe that dictate what prices ought to be. The laws of supply and demand and the relationship between them. And I'm being a kind of aggrandizing about it, but the reality about prices is that they should communicate the relationship between how much is available to be sold and how much people want to buy. And what price, assuming there has to be one set price for everybody, what price maximizes the total utility and happiness and satisfaction of all the sellers and the buyers, or the maximum number of sellers and buyers. You're never going to make everybody happy, because there's some sellers that won't sell until the price hits $1 billion, and there's some buyers who won't buy unless it's free. And so those people will always be unhappy. But for the maximum number of people that could be happy making an exchange, making a trade, price represents where that happens, where the maximum number of people can be the happiest. Now, that's not what price is in our world, right? In our world, price is MSRP. It is what somebody came up with a number, they closed their eyes, and they threw a dart at a board, and they said, you know what? We're going to charge this for that. And when you go into Walmart, you say, what is the price? And that's the price that's there. And we'll get into some of the funny kind of complicating stuff about Walmart. But those prices, the Walmart and the Wizards of the Coast and your local game store sets are sticky. They don't adjust them. They're not dynamic yet, right? And that's kind of the funny thing, is that there's been some experiments with some companies about having electronic signs for prices so that they could change them. If it's hotter outside, you raise the price on your cold sodas. Coca-Cola did that once. Coca-Cola had vending machines that would respond to the temperature outside, where if it was a hotter day, they would sell soda for, they'd sell soda with a higher price. People didn't like that. Coke had to stop doing that because, people just were not a fan. So, and Wendy's was trying dynamic pricing too. But anyways, those dynamic prices are not sticky. They are dynamic and they adjust with supply and demand. And now you might say like, oh, Nick, you're making the supply demand thing sound so good earlier. Look, if it's hot outside and a Coke is worth $5 to you, as opposed to when it's cold outside and a Coke is only worth $1 to you, then there's a lot of good reasons why Coke should charge $5 when it's hot outside and $1 when it's cold outside. I'm not saying the consumers all love it or that it feels good or that it's like not kind of dystopian, but that is efficient from an economics perspective. Anyways, we can get it. Tell me in the comment section below how awful economists sound by the end of this video. So if prices are sticky, they don't change, or at least they don't change easily. And this makes a lot of sense. If you're a local game store and you put stuff on your shelves and you put a price tag under it, then there's work and effort required to change the price on the price tag. Heaven forbid you have a case of singles of cards and top loaders with stickers on them of the price, not like a QR code that links to some database, but just like this card is $5, this card is $8. Those are some literal sticky prices, because the effort that it would take to go through each of those individual cards and change those prices is a lot of work. And therefore, the odds as a consumer that you're going to go into that store and find a rockin' good deal, you're going to find some card that spiked the other day, but nobody realized it, or at least no one in the store has changed the prices yet, and then you get a great screaming deal on this card. That's what happens thanks to sticky prices. What also happens is you go into a store and you see, what? you're still selling Marvel Jumpstart booster boxes for $210, even though they're $110 on TCG Player. Thumbs down. I'm getting out of here, right? That's also sticky prices, right? Is there can end up being a surplus of goods thanks to sticky prices, where if prices were dynamic and ebbed and flowed with supply and demand, your game store would realize like, we're not going to really get away. Even though game stores offer a lot of coolness that, you don't get buying a box online. Like, for example, you get the box right then and there. That's a cool part of buying at your local game stores. You don't have to wait for somebody to ship it to you. Even that coolness might not be worth an extra like $100 premium. It might be worth a $50 premium, like you sell your Marvel Jumpstart for $160, but it might not be worth $210, $100 premium to TCG Player for the average player. Anyways, pricing for a local game store is hard. So prices can be sticky for many reasons. We've talked about a couple of them. We've talked about there could be labor involved with changing prices. There could also just be systematically, like Walmart charges MSRP. And actually, I don't even know if this is true for Magic products. I think that Walmart will charge more sometimes if they expect it. But regardless, they kind of choose a price and they set it, and just systematically, that is the way it works. And until the technology or something improves, they're going to have sticky prices at your big box stores, at your local game stores, for the most part. Prices can also be sticky for other reasons. For example, they can be sticky just because sellers don't want to sell for less. And I think we saw this. We saw this with Final Fantasy, I believe. Final Fantasy collector booster boxes were going up and down for a year. And recently they've gone up more and they've now come back down some. But they were going between $1,000 and $1,300 up and down for the longest time. And what I noticed is that they go down to $1,000, but not really below $1,000. I mean, yes, there was a sale or two where somebody's selling it for $9.99 or $9.80 or whatever. But for the most part, the lowest it got was $1,000. And I don't know for sure, but I imagine that part of the reason for that is that the people selling those Final Fantasy collector booster boxes were thinking to themselves, this is at least $1,000 booster box. And even though they weren't selling, like the market wasn't buying those boxes at that price, that was the lowest the price went on TCG Player because people just weren't willing to sell for less than that. And so prices can just sit there and be high even though nobody's buying. Actually, another example is this Lord of the Rings special edition collector booster packs. I have a couple of these. If you want them, reach out, email below. They're priced here at like $540, but they're like barely selling at that price. I mean, only 2 in the past month. The real market price for these is lower than $540. But people just aren't, people remember like, oh, but somebody bought a box of these for 10 grand. And so each pack should be at least like $800. And so anyways, a lot of people aren't willing to sell for less than this. And I guess there are confirmed sales here. Anyways, the point being is that there can just be vibes. There can just be sellers that say, you know what, I'm not going to buy it or not going to sell at this price. And there could be buyers that say, I'm not going to buy at this price for a variety of reasons that could create price stickiness. Right. Let's get into some examples. So I guess I've already talked about some of these, but you go into your local game store. I did this. I was in Arizona visiting a friend, and go to your local game store and they have the like 50-cent rare mythic boxes, which not all game stores do, surprisingly, but this game store did. And you go in there and you're finding $2 cards, $5 cards, $10 cards, because the reality is that it is so hard to dynamically update the prices on all of your inventory. If you stick a card in a bulk box and you're like, oh, this is just bulk, and it spikes the next day, what are you going to do? As a game store, it's not worth your time to go in and change those prices. So I made a killing at that one game store that one time. I wouldn't recommend it as a strategy for like trying to make real money. And when I say a killing, I mean, I made like $20 of value, whoop-de-doo. But, but it feels good. It feels great to be going through a bulk box and you pull out a card and you're like, what? This is like $5. I can get it for 50 cents. So that's nice. Right. Secret lair, sticky prices. When we talk about surplus or a what's the word? Limited quantity, a kind of famine of product. Secret lair is the perfect example because it is so rare. It's almost inexistent. I mean, it'd be hard to measure, I suppose, but to have a secret lair where there's just the right amount at the right price. Secret lairs, for the most part, they're either overpriced and undervalue, as in there's not enough value in them, and therefore they sit there and there's a surplus of product, or they're underpriced, they have more value than the price tag costs, and they sell out instantly. And there's a shortage of that product. So secret lair, there's no dynamic pricing. There's no market supply and demand forces that get to adjust the pricing. Instead, that's why secret lairs are kind of a scalper's paradise, right? Because of sticky prices. And this is getting to kind of the thesis and the point of why this is so important to understand, which is that sticky prices is how you make money. It's how you buy low and sell high in dynamic markets, which Magic is most certainly a dynamic market. So if you're thinking to yourself, like, how do I make good money as a evil, dirty scalper investor? The question is, do you know where prices are sticky? Do you have the sources and the places to go to look for product that the price will be potentially greatly undervalued from what the market dictates that the price should be? So if you're like absolute level 10, 7 rings, depths of hell, that kind of guy, you can put on your hood and go raid a Walmart or a Costco and push the kids out of the way and grab your product or whatever. Although what's interesting about that is that doesn't really happen with Magic. I think that mostly is like a Pokemon thing. But anyways, boo Pokemon. So, that's the worst version of it, is you go raid in person and you're super rude and whatever. But then, of course, the other version of it, which is like more common, is like secret lairs. Secret lairs go online and you hop in line and in the virtual line. And if the product is underpriced relative to what the market dictates it should be, and you're able to get some, then boom, you can just hop onto eBay, flip it. Great. Prices will be sticky with their local game stores. Sometimes local game stores will sell products at great prices to locals. And that is a cool thing to do to fight scalpers, because it is better to support your local scalpers than it is to support the distant scalpers. You know what I'm saying? Because like, if you're selling boxes, like, let me tell a story. Fallout collector booster boxes, they are already pre-ordering for $400+ online. I saw that a local game store was selling it for $240. A Fallout collector booster box to me was worth $240. I would buy it for $240, and I did. I bought one for $240. It's pretty cool. Came with a buy a box promo, and I got that box. But then I had to make a decision. I had to look inside myself and say, is this worth $400? Because if I open it, that's what I lose out on, is $400. And the answer to that question was no, it was worth $240. And so I indulged, forgive me, Father, for I've sinned, in some evil scalping, and I sold that box online and to someone for $400, somebody who wanted it more than I did. And so that local store got to support their local community, and in that instance, a local scalper. And so stores will do this, right? And your local stores will say like, hey, we'll sell to locals at a good price at MSRP, whatever. And then if that product isn't worth the amount you would have been willing to pay for it anyway, then you can just turn around and sell it and make some money. And so sticky prices, that's the key. It's not, easier said than done. A lot of controversial topics here. Love to hear your thoughts. This is a little raw, a little just up in your face, some economics and some, I don't know, just general thoughts and advice. So let me know what you think. Comment section below. Subscribe if you like this stuff. And that's all. That's all, folks. Thanks for watching. Peace.